In our video number 2 today, under the Indian economic development, we are going to study the condition of the industrial sector during the British colonial rule. Now, India was famous for handicraft industries because of two reasons. One, that the reputation of fine quality of the material that was used, and second, the high standards of craftsmanship. These were the two reasons that Indian handicrafts were very well known in the world. And the handicrafts industries were cotton and silk textiles, metal and precious stoneworks, etc. Now, during the colonial period, these handicraft industries collapsed. What could be the reason? The reason was the policy that was brought out by the British government. The discriminatory economic and political policies pursued by the British government. What did they do? When it came to the British industries or British products, the export of raw materials from India was tariff-free. The import of British industrial products into India was also tariff-free. What is tariff? Tariff is a tax on imported goods. So it was tax-free in India while exporting. It was tax-free from Britain while exporting into India. That means while we imported into India. So both the ways it was tax-free. Now when it came to Indian products, when we wanted to export them, there was huge tax on it or heavy duty on it. And when we imported materials, also there was heavy duty. So the import and export of Indian goods was very, very difficult because they were highly priced now because of the taxes. Because there was no tax on the British goods and the raw materials that was exported into Britain, those products or those goods were available for a very, very cheap price. Also, there was disappearance of the princely courts. The kings who patroned these people or for the handicrafts industries also started decaying. There was one more reason why the handicrafts industries collapsed. The machine-made products that were brought in from Britain were cheaper than the goods that were made in our own country. Then new patterns on demand. That means certain people started taking into the westernization. So they started demanding the Western goods or the goods from Britain. And so the whole lifestyle changed. So a new class emerged, which brought in the British culture. So what happened due to this collapse of handicrafts industries? The effect of it was that it created a massive unemployment. But these handicraft industries were not replaced by anything else. So ultimately, the people who were involved in the handicraft industries, they lost their jobs. Now, since the British goods were available for a very cheap price, this increased the demand for imported cheap manufactured goods from Britain. Now, Britain also, the policy also had a twofold motive behind deindustrialization of India. What was the twofold motive? It was, one, to reduce India to a mere exporter of raw materials. So India was just the exporter of raw materials, and to turn India into a sprawling market for the finished products. We learned during the Industrial Revolution, the European industries, they started looking for their markets for their finished products, and they had their colonies in which they could sell their products for a cheaper price. So here India was one of the markets for their finished products. However, there was a development of modern industrial sector during the second half of the 19th century. The modern industrial sector started only in the second half of the 19th century. Under this, we can see setting up of cotton and jute industries. The cotton textiles industries came up in Maharashtra and Gujarat because cotton grows well over there. So even today we find more textile mills in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Surat is one of the well-known places. Then jute industries, because jute grows well in an atmosphere that is available in West Bengal. So jute industries came up in West Bengal, but these jute mills were dominated by the foreigners, and the jute industries concentrated only in the West Bengal. Then later came up in 1907 the Tata Iron and Steel Company. That was in 1907 by the Tatas. And then other industries that came up were sugar, cement, paper, etc. But these all came only after the World War II. The industrial policy is one that decides the economic fate of a country. The industrial policy that was brought out by the British government had certain drawbacks and shortfalls. Since the British government was only interested in their products and their markets, in India, the industrial sector saw a very slow progress because modernization of industries was very slow. Then lack of capital goods industries. What are capital goods? Capital goods are those goods which can help produce machine tools, which in turn are used for producing other goods. That means capital goods produce those machine parts which are used to produce other goods or finished products. So there was a lack of capital goods industry because investment was very difficult. And then this contributed to, there was no near substitute for handicraft industries. We learned just now that the handicraft industry collapsed, and these people who were employed in the handicrafts industries did not find any proper employment. Then all this contributed to a very low growth rate or very low GDP. Then the public sector, that means that which is taken over by the government, was confined only to certain areas like railways, power generation, communication, ports, and other departmental undertakings. Why railways? Because railways are good for communication, they can transport goods from one place to the other. So railways developed. And this was only in the interest of the British courts. Power generation to run their factories, communication, and ports. Ports were important because movement of goods from Britain to India was only through the sea route. However, there is one more point that is very important when we deal about ports. The Suez Canal. This is the Mediterranean Sea and this is the Red Sea. So the Suez Canal was dug to connect the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea here. Here is Britain, and from here earlier when they had to travel to Mumbai or India, they had to go round Africa and come to India. So this was the port over here. We all know about the Gateway of India. Then this was around 12,300 miles or 19,800 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean into Indian Ocean and then to Mumbai. But after the opening of the Suez Canal, the sea route became shorter. So one need not have to travel all around Africa. Instead, they could travel from the Mediterranean Sea into Red Sea, Arabian Sea and into Mumbai. So that's one reason why ports were developed. Departmental undertakings are all public sector because most of the people employed in the departmental undertakings were the Britishers. So that was the condition of the industrial sector under the colonial period. However, there are two questions that are very important over here. What was the twofold motive behind systematic deindustrialization of India? And the second one is the shortfalls of the industrial policy by the British government. So those are the two important questions. Trade relations of India with the rest of the world were very good in the ancient times. And the Romans used to call India the sink of world's bullion. But the British rule in India brought an end to it. India became only the exporter of raw materials and the importer of finished goods, is what we just learned under the industrial sector. So what was the restrictive trade policies of the Indian government or the British government? It was that India could not decide to which country they would trade with. It would be decided by the British government. Commodity production, how much will be produced, how much will be exported, and then the trade and the tariff, to whom will we trade with, and what would be the tariff. Tariff is the tax on the goods. More tax would increase the prices of the goods, less tax would reduce the price of the goods. However, there is a limit to the price structure also, and that we understand from macroeconomics. This restrictive trade policy affected the structure, the volume, and the direction of India's foreign trade. We learned the twofold motive behind the deindustrialization of India, and so India only became the exporter of primary products like the raw silk, cotton, wool, sugar, indigo, jute, etc. And it became the importer of the finished consumer goods like clothes, light machinery, etc. Then during the British rule, exports and imports of the country came under the monopoly control of the British government. What was this monopoly? That 50% of the trade would be done with Britain and the rest would be with other countries like China, Ceylon, which is today called Sri Lanka, Persia, which was earlier, which we now call Iran. So those were the countries that were allowed to trade with India. The 50% was with these countries and 50% was with Britain alone. So while exports of primary products from India supplied inputs to the British industries, imports of finished goods from Britain provided a huge market to the British industries, and that is what we learnt in the industrial sector also. So it developed a huge export surplus, but there was a scarcity of essential commodities. What are essential commodities? Food grains, clothes, kerosene in the domestic market. But this trade surplus or export surplus was only to the benefit of the British industries or British government. The profits on the export surplus was used in making payments of the British government. The expenses on war, whatever wars they fought, that was, paid up by the export surplus. And then import invisible items. Invisible items are the services. So importing of the invisible items was also done with the export surplus. Now all this contributed to the drain of Indian wealth. Now, this is a very important question. Drain of Indian wealth. How was this drain of Indian wealth? It was due to the huge drain from the wealth from India was compounded to the backwardness of the Indian economy. Administrative and war expenses led to the huge drain of Indian wealth. Now also we learnt in the industrial sector, just now we learnt Suez Canal, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, that was used as a route for trade, reduced the cost of transportation and also access to Indian markets. Now because it became very easy for those people to enter into Indian markets through sea route, through the Suez Canal. This also intensified British control. So here there are two questions that are important. One is, what do you understand by economic drain? And the second one is, see, though there was a trade surplus that was generated, but this surplus came of a huge cost to the country's economy. You have to give reasons for this. So those are the two important questions.